What if I told you that Max Verstappen is no longer a pilot completely committed to Red Bull? What if I told you that the man who dominated F1 in recent years is actively negotiating with Mercedes, and that he already imposed his conditions? In an unthinkable turn only 1 year ago, Mercedes is facing a crossroads that goes beyond a simple hiring. Signing Max Verstappen is not just to ensure the talent of the most dominant pilot of the last decade, but to put into play the identity of the team. Conversations between Toto Wolff and the Verstappen clan, far from being vague rumors, have established themselves in an active and advanced state negotiation, according to multiple international sources. This scenario had never occurred before with such a degree of seriousness, which already represents a seismic movement in the political structure of the current Formula One. Sky Italy and ESPN agree that the Dutch has shown a real disposition to break his contract with Red Bull in force until 2028 to get into the German car in 2026. But this is not an impulsive act or an emotional reaction. It is the result of a strategic evaluation, meditated and accompanied by a specific performance clause in its contract. This clause, even with contradictory versions about its activation, some sources mention the top 3, others the top 4 or even the top 2, allows Verstappen to disconnect if at the end of the Hungary Grand Prix of August 3rd it is not found in the elite of the championship. This clause is a pressure letter not only towards Red Bull, but also an indirect message to Mercedes. It is willing to leave, but only if it finds a solid structure that supports it. What few dare to say openly is that Verstappen has already made an emotional decision. His confidence in Red Bull is broken. The exit of key technical figures, the internal crisis generated by the Horner case and the erratic decisions that have led the team to lose performance have pushed the champion to consider other options. It is no longer just about having a fast car. It is about having a stable, professional, and predictable environment. And in that aspect, Mercedes appears as the only viable alternative. But accepting Verstappen implies redefining the internal dynamics of the German team. Toto Wolff is not only facing a technical or contractual dilemma, it faces a possible philosophical transformation of the team. Incorporating Verstappen is to open the door to a pilot who not only demands results but influence. Its environment is not limited to sports. It is formed by strategists, advisors and media figures that have historically operated with rare autonomy. For Mercedes, this means giving up part of the traditionally hierarchical and meticulously organized structure that allowed them to dominate between 2014 and 2020. And this is where the risk becomes tangible. Because while Verstappen's talent does not admit discussion, his incorporation could generate internal tensions, especially with George Russell, who has assumed a leading role since Hamilton's departure. In addition, there is an unknown on how to fit Verstappen in a team where decisions have been historically collective, not individual. In Red Bull, Max has had a voice and vote. In Mercedes, I would have to earn it or demand it from day one. Time runs. Mercedes needs to make a decision before the Verstappen clause is activated. And that decision could define not only the future of its alignment, but the entire destination of the Formula One championship in the post-2026 era. The second act of this story immerses us in the core of the demands that Max Verstappen has raised to Mercedes, a set of conditions that not only reveal its priorities as a pilot, but also their vision of the future in Formula One. These demands are not whims or simple technical requests. They are the reflection of a champion who has learned, based on their own mistakes and successes, what he needs to win consistently in this new stage of his career. The first condition that Verstappen has made clear is the need for a solid technical project with a long-term vision, particularly focused on the revolutionary regulatory change of 2026. It does not want a team that improvises or reacts to the development of others. It requires a structured development plan from now on, with full access to the guidelines of the new car and the guarantee that your feedback will be not only heard but implemented. According to sources close to Paddock, Max has made it clear that it will not take a single step out of Red Bull if you do not see a structure that is at least at the level of the Austrian equipment in 2021 in terms of planning and technical execution. He wants to know the simulations in the wind tunnel, the initial aerodynamic decisions and the conceptual direction of the new hybrid propeller that Mercedes prepares for the regulations of 2026. But that's not all. Verstappen has also asked for a place at the strategic decision table. It is not about interfering with the role of engineers or designers, but to ensure that their experience is an active part in the process of evolution of the car. This demand makes sense if we consider that Max has worked for years with Gianpiero Lambiase in an almost perfect technical synergy, developing winning cars based on mutual feedback. And And if Wolff wants to replicate that success, he must be willing to reformulate the traditional flow of decisions in Brackley, giving Verstappen a level of involvement that Lewis Hamilton did not even have in the years of absolute domain. The second great demand revolves around the structural and political stability of the team. Max is not willing to enter an organization divided or worn out by internal struggles. Chaos lived in Red Bull in 2024 and 2025, with power wars, technical brains and contradictory decisions from leadership, has taught him that technical talent only shines in a coherent environment. Therefore, he has asked Wolff guarantees that key figures such as James Allison will continue to lead the project, that there will be no external interferences that condition the daily operation of the team, and that Mercedes' corporate strategy will not affect the interests of the Formula One, the company's real commitment to the future of the team. Finally, and perhaps the most sensitive, is the team of the teammate. Max has been categorical. He does not want to repeat experiences of political tension such as those that Checo Perez lived in Red Bull or the internal conflicts that marked the Hamilton-Rosberg era. He has suggested that, although he does not demand the condition of a number one pilot by contract, he does want clarity in the roles from the beginning. This means avoiding public confrontations, eliminating ambiguities in the strategies, and having by his side a pilot who complements his approach, not to challenge him from internal politics. Although there are no confirmed names, in the paddock it is speculated that Verstappen would prefer to share a team with a young man still in the process of consolidation such as Kimi Antonelli, to have to play every centimeter with a George Russell already affirmed as an internal reference. Accepting all Max Verstappen conditions is not simply a commitment to performance, it is a complete redefinition of the Mercedes operating model. At this point, Toto Wolff and his team are not negotiating a contract with one more pilot. They are weighing if it is worth remodeling their management philosophy to accommodate a figure whose presence alters the balance of power within any structure, however consolidated it is. It is here that the line between a master play and a potential risk becomes extremely thin. George Russell has been the face of Mercedes' renewal since Hamilton's departure. His role as heir to the team's legacy, his demonstrated talent and his growing internal influence have positioned him as the future Brackley leader. Introducing Verstappen in that ecosystem inevitably represents a threat to that stability. As much as Wolff wants to dress the decision as strategic or technical, the arrival of Max would imply a reorganization of the hierarchical order, not only on the track but also in the garage, in tactical decisions and, above all, in the public perception of the team. Russell would go from being the banner of the project to be forced to share or give that role to a pilot whose shadow is impossible to ignore. But beyond internal effects, is the most difficult calculation. Is it worth running that risk if the goal is to recover lost supremacy? Wolff knows it better than anyone. Mercedes has lived a slow and meticulous reconstruction process after the end of its hegemony in 2021. The lack of a dominant car in recent years has not been the product of chance, but of errors in the development of the W13, W14, and in part of the W15, affected by erroneous decisions about design philosophy. Betting on Verstappen means accelerating this process, forcing it to reach an early maturity that may not be ready yet. And it is that something has made clear Verstappen and its conditions is that it will not build from scratch. He wants to integrate into a winning structure, or at least one that is on the cusp of development by 2026. This forces Mercedes to adjust their current progressive evolution approach and think as if they were already in full battle for the title. The margin of error is eliminated. Each technical step, each operational decision, and each internal message must be aligned with the objective of competing for championships from the first race of the new regulatory cycle. The play, however, has an unprecedented return potential. If Mercedes manages to absorb Verstappen without collapsing internally, he would win not only the best pilot of his generation, but also a technical leader who has demonstrated an exceptional capacity to maximize performance even in imperfect cars. With the 2026 regulation promising a revolution in the way in which hybrid cars are understood, having the most complete paddock pilot could make a difference between returning to the top or staying as a chronic candidate. And although Verstappen could become the new symbol of the Mercedes resurrection, it could also be the catalyst of a civil war within the team if things do not come out as planned. The story of the F1 is full of examples of great signings that destroyed more than they built. But it is also marked by those who, with a brave decision, changed forever the fate of a team. The situation that is being configured around Max Verstappen and Mercedes has implications that transcend the merely sports. We are not talking only about the transfer of a star pilot. We are witnessing a potential disruption in the political, technical, and symbolic order of the modern Formula One. If this signing is concretized, it would be the greatest power movement in the championship since the passage of Lewis Hamilton to Mercedes in 2013, and perhaps with even deeper consequences, given the position of force from which part Verstappen and the state of necessity in which the German structure is located. The dilemma for Mercedes is not simply to choose the best pilot available. It is an identity proof. Are they willing to give up their traditional structure, their method of shared management, their internal culture of calm, to get on the roller coaster that implies having Verstappen in command? And more importantly, are they prepared to handle the inevitable turbulence that this will generate in the relationship with their engineers, with George Russell, and with their own sponsors and shareholders? On the side of Verstappen, the play is equally risky. Leaving the environment that made him 4 consecutive world champion, leaving behind the team that has given him a white letter to develop the car to measure would be a brave but extremely exposed step. If the Mercedes car of 2026 is not up to it, if the promises are not fulfilled, their legacy could receive a severe blow. And even more critical, I would give Red Bull the narrative of having lost the champion for external causes, not for internal weaknesses. And if that were not enough, this maneuver has a direct domino effect on the rest of the grille. If Verstappen signs with Mercedes, Red Bull will not only have to look for a first-level replacement, but will probably alter the complete pilot market. Figures like Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, even Lando Norris could come into play. Teams such as Ferrari and McLaren would have to reconfigure their long-term strategies, and the rest of the grid would enter an advanced seat dance, motivated by the largest change in a decade. All this raises a question: would you agree that Mercedes sacrificed his internal stability for having the most dominant pilot of the last years? Or do you think Verstappen should not leave Red Bull and should continue leading the project even with its current weaknesses? Leave me your vision in the comments. Is this movement a master play that will rewrite the story of Mercedes, or an error that could cost them years of reconstruction?